Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ. This is not going to be another debacle where people can't see us; they can only hear us, is it?
I thought that was an improvement. I don't believe anybody who is a fan of the show sits in front of their computer and looks at us intently for 45 minutes.
I would have to say, I don't think I never look good in this. Like, it's hard to look good in this setting, for one thing. Never mind people. I get that people don't want to watch us, but in fairness to you and me, this is not the most flattering imagery. This, we're not wearing makeup. We've got the harsh lighting.
Just so folks of us who listen to us on the podcast may not know what we're talking about. There is a version of the show. I mean, this originally was a video show, and still is a video show primarily.
A dialogue.
Dialogue is the technical term. A term that has never caught on. It never became a. We're
going to make that happen.
But you can still watch us over at bloggingheads.tv and on the Blogging Heads YouTube channel. I had adjusted the recording settings on my Skype recorder for a podcast interview that I did. I made it audio only. I forgot to switch it back. So the last show that we did only had the audio. For those of you who do watch us on the video, we're probably saying, you know what, this is better. Who needs to look at your mugs? Put on the podcast app and we're good.
The good news is, for those who do like listening to the show, your audio will be bad this time.
Yes, I have a second technical problem this week, which is my microphone plug. I don't know about you, Matt. When I host people for any kind of large event like Christmas or such, I don't maintain a neat house, generally speaking. So I have to do a mad scramble 24 hours before and shove things in drawers and whatnot. And I shove my microphone in a drawer, which I do all the time. But something must have been on top of it, and the wire, the USB jack got smushed, and now it doesn't fit into my computer anymore. So I need to solve that problem. Welcome to 2019 for me.
This will probably be the first time in DMZ history where my audio may be superior to yours in quality.
So while I usually have the superior arguments in the DMZ, this will be a test whether is it just the quality of my audio or is it actually the substance of my content?
I think we know the answer to that. But before we get into it, Christmas, New Year, how did it go? Any misadventures?
Christmas was long. It felt like
kids are still out of school, right?
No, today the first day back today. It felt like the full 12 days. They have like a post-Christmas greed. I mean, even though they get everything that they asked for pretty much, they then want to go out and get more stuff. The adrenaline rush of opening things hasn't ended. So that's sort of irritating. The gauntlet of family is always a lot. This is my proposed life hack for next Christmas. I say to the kids, you can get 3 things. Pick your 3 things or your top 3 things. And then I'll give you a Target gift card and you can go nuts after Christmas. Just bake that into the system. So I'm not trying to go getting you 15 things and trying to cover your bases. You go figure out the rest when we're done here.
Less is more. I agree with that. You don't want too much. And I feel when I was a kid, my parents got me awesome stuff, but it was mixed in with me opening up. In addition to the good stuff they got me, I would open up boxes with socks in it, and I would have to pretend that I was delighted to get this. And I think they had the more is more mentality, just we want the Christmas tree to look like there's so much stuff under it. And put like a weird pressure on me. So with our kids, they only got a few things, but they got really good stuff that they really wanted. And I just think that's a better way of going about it,
Well, I don't know about your kids. My kids, they write out the long lists. My young one put the list for Santa under the tree. And even though she got most of the stuff on that list, she was like, Santa didn't bring me a robot. I asked for a robot. What's Santa doing? This is his job.
You had one job.
I don't know how you did, Matt. I got a couple presidential books this year, so I'm close to owning a book for every president. I'm not quite there, but I'm almost there.
That's cool.
But I did get my Nixon book. I actually had a Twitter shout out because I wanted a Nixon book that was on the presidency, so it wasn't all Watergate. And it wasn't a lot of backstory. He's got a big backstory. I mean, there's a relatively new book out called, I think it's Nixon a Life by John Farrell. And I feel like there's a lot about the presidency that I don't know because it doesn't get talked about very much beyond superficialities. But I was hoping there was one that was more recent because there's all these audio tapes of his recordings that have come out that you want to know. You got like the freshest stuff about how the sausage got made, and even Rick Perlstein, who wrote Nixonland, who I used to work with many years ago, he actually got roped into my Twitter conversation, not by me, and he recommended this, which I actually already knew about. This is part of the University of Kansas presidential series, which I have a lot of their books. But this came out 20 years ago. Presidency of Richard Nixon by Melvin Small, but apparently, by all accounts, this is the best bet for really delving into the presidency itself. And I also
before you get to the next one, based on your estimates of time, what year will it be when you get around to reading the Nixon book?
I'm on Grant right now.
Okay.
So Grant's the 16th, 17th president?
17, yeah.
So I'm not quite halfway. But I have already read Teddy through Truman.
So another 40 years, and you'll get to the Nixon book.
Maybe. I mean, once I get through, Hayes. Yeah, actually, I read a Garfield Arthur book already, so I could skip. Though I have another Arthur book that I'm curious about.
Is that how you want to do this, Bill? Do you want to cut corners? We could do that. We could do that if that's how you want to go.
Then I got the double Cleveland Harrison.
You check two boxes with Cleveland, right? Because he technically counts as two numbers.
Right. And then you got McKinley. And then I'm up to Teddy, which I'm already at. So I don't have too much to do.
That has to be the best. That has to be the best trick question. Like if you say, how many presidents have there been? If people who know, very few people would know 45, but they would say 45, but they would be wrong, right? Because there's actually only.
I forget 45 counts Cleveland twice or not. I have to go back and check.
I think it counts him twice. Now, of course, this doesn't count the Articles of Confederation, which is a different thing. And you could make an argument that John Hanson or somebody like that should be on the list too. I don't know. But I digress. What's the other book up there, Bill?
I'm actually covering the list of presidential trivia questions because I actually want to do a presidential trivia night here in Northampton sometime soon. So, reading my Grant book, what is Ulysses S. Grant's middle name?
It's just S.
Wrong. It's Ulysses. It's Ulysses. He was born Hiram Ulysses Grant.
Oh.
The S is like a total screw up. It's not his name.
So Harry S. Truman is just S, right?
I don't know off the top of my head, but that wouldn't surprise me.
I think that may be. I'm sure the internet will judge me and fact check me. That's interesting. So Ulysses is his middle name.
Yeah, he got his application to his endorsement for West Point's. The congressman screwed up and called Ulysses Simpson Grant, which is not his name, and it got written down as Ulysses S. Grant when he was at West Point, and that stuck.
I don't know. Would Hiram have gotten elected president?
I know. Well, Ulysses was a weird name. It was not a common name for people to have. It was not a biblical name. It was not a name of a founding father. So he got kind of made fun of for having this sort of weird artsy name that was, based on some Greek reference. He might well become president with a more common name. The name wasn't what did it.
Wow.
Anyway, my other book is a Cleveland book. This is The President is a Sick Man, wherein the supposedly virtuous Grover Cleveland survives a secret surgery at sea and vilifies the courageous newspaperman who dared expose the truth.
Wow.
So this is a sort of a bit of a scandalous book during his presidency, and I also have all the way up here. You can't see on my shelf, I don't think. A Secret Life: The Lies and Scandals of President Grover Cleveland, which accuses him of being a rapist before he was president. So I have two separate scandal books.
Was that included in your Stormy Daniels Politico magazine?
No, because the woman that accused him of rape didn't write her own memoir. I mean, she did give a written account. My understanding is that she wasn't believed at the time. But that is all covered in that book, which I haven't gotten to yet. But even those two books don't cover really the presidencies of Cleveland, which is what is my primary interest, though I am curious about these stories as well.
I do think you should write a memoir about when you're done all of them.
I got other plans, man. Other plans.
Well,
anyway, should we get down to business?
But none of them are as good as this idea.
So we're in a new year. Government's
Yes.
still partially shut down. Democratic presidential primary is getting into high gear with Elizabeth Warren essentially jumping in the race along with Julian Castro. And we have the new speaker coming in, Nancy Pelosi, but a bit of drama brewing over the rules package. And you have Mitt Romney coming in, already taking his first pot shot at Trump. So I don't know what of this series of events is most intriguing you today.
Well, look, I think we should probably go through them all. Let's start with Elizabeth Warren. So, I guess count me among conventional wisdom. I don't think she's got a great shot. I think it's weird that she announced on New Year's Eve. I think it's weird that she's kind of trying to be cool and take a page from AOC and do the Instagram video with the uncorking the beer. It just seems pretty lame. And I think, there's criticism of this, right? Like when you say that this is misogyny, this is, you wouldn't say that if she was a man, or I think I'm pretty critical of everybody. So it's like regardless, but I do think there are types of people that are more susceptible to Trump. And I don't think it's about gender. Like I think that if you look at the people who've actually gone head to head with Trump at different times and fared the best, it's actually like Carly Fiorina and Nikki Haley among Republicans have probably been able to push back at him and do better than most men. So it's not a gender thing, but I think that there's a type of person that and I think Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton are very similar. Older white women of a certain age who come across in an unlikable way. Now, saying that, some people think is you wouldn't say that about a man. Well, but I think there are plenty of women who come across as likable. Like I think Oprah Winfrey comes across as very likable. I think Michelle Obama comes across as very likable. There's something about Warren and Hillary Clinton that I think positions them very poorly to go up against Donald Trump. And so I'm not, granted, I don't think Elizabeth Warren cares that much what I have to say, and I'm certainly not her target voter. But if Democrats want to win in 2020, this is not the change they've been waiting for.
Well, I agree with you in part. I don't agree with you in part in all that. Now, I wrote a piece that came out Christmas Eve for Politico, which 2020 Democrats won 2018. which was sort of my scorecard. I didn't rank it. It wasn't number one, number two, number three, but I did group people. And my winners of the year were Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar. And as you know, Matt, I'm still a Beto skeptic. I wrote that piece earlier as well. I haven't changed on that, but objectively speaking, O'Rourke and Klobuchar are the two people who were in Nowheresville at the start of the year in terms of presidential politics and are now being treated as serious contenders. Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden started the year at the top of all primary polling, and they still are at the top of all primary polling. Biden number one, Bernie number two. So I gave them still in front status, and I do not think they should be dismissed in any respect. Warren is the one candidate who started the year in a good place. Polling
the good
existed.
Place.
Great show.
That should be the title, though, of that piece.
There are only three people in early polling that were getting double digits: Biden, Bernie, Warren. But Warren stopped getting double digits in the summer when Trump, brought back the Pocahontas jabs, and so her number was softening throughout the summer before the DNA test. There's a narrative now that she blew on the DNA test, and I think that didn't help, obviously. But it was a reaction to the fact that the Pocahontas attacks were already weakening her. There was already a sense, as you say, Matt, you're saying you're not the target audience. Believe me, there are plenty of Democrats. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, okay? There are people here that tell me privately Elizabeth Warren can't win. Or at least they have said that over the course of the last several months. So
they've said what?
That Elizabeth Warren can't win, that she can't beat Trump. There is a sense that she is a weak matchup vis-a-vis him.
Yes.
And the fact that the DNA test was such a flop, I think it was a flop because she has been the image of her. The reason why she was the hot commodity back in 2014 was that she was seen as the consummate populist fighter. No one shreds a Wall Street banker like Elizabeth Warren. When she was on her chair at a Senate Banking Committee hearing and a banker was in her sights, she would tear that person limb by limb, and that video would go viral in a heartbeat. But the boogeyman of the moment is not so much Wall Street, it is Trump, and the extended fight she's had with him before the DNA test and after, she has not won that fight. She has not shown people, I know the secret to taking this guy down. She comes across much more on the defensive. I'm now talking about Pocahontas. I'm talking about my Native American heritage. I'm not talking about my economic philosophy. So she hasn't turned
I think part of it too, Bill, is I don't think any politician, I'm using the word politician here, can in the modern era let me phrase it as a question or as a hypo, like can a politician, someone who's elected, stay hot for 5 or 6 years, right? So like Barack Obama gets hot in 2004, starts running in 2006 probably, and is elected in 2008. Chris Christie missed his window. Elizabeth Warren, part of the story, I just think, is she should have run. She missed her window.
Well, you can miss windows, but
that's why Beto O'Rourke, by the way, that's an argument for Beto O'Rourke.
I mean, that is the main argument for him, and I think that is an insufficient argument for reasons I stated on a past show, so I won't relitigate. But I mean, there is the slingshot path. The slingshot path to success. I said I'm on Grant. Grant was a washout in 1860, slinking back to his dad's leather tannery because he couldn't make it as a farmer, and resigned from the military after going on a drinking bender because he was stuck into a remote post and he couldn't stand being away from his wife and family. And in a matter of 3 years, he becomes the most successful Civil War general, and in 8 years becomes president. Woodrow Wilson was a washout at Princeton University, lost the battle against the university trustees over the exclusivity of the eating clubs, and then in a 2-year span gets elected president of the United States. Never run for office for anything before up until that point. I mean, so there are people that have their moments and meet them, but there are also elder statesmen. There are also people that do it on the long track. Richard Nixon, loses the president in 1860, loses the governor in 1862, but gets a new moment in 1968.
Yeah, but so, my argument here, Bill, is that a lot of things are cyclical, and you can look at history and say that this works or this doesn't. My argument is that this is a linear thing, and that the days where Richard Nixon's back again, as Billy Joel's saying, that I'm not sure that that works anymore. I think everything's it's more ephemeral. You have to have that moment.
But who is the indisputable front runner for the Democratic nomination? There is no other argument but Joe Biden. That's not my bias, so people think I'm some sort of Biden fanboy. It is just a plain fact. He leads every poll, in many cases, or at least in several cases, by a lot. Now, that doesn't mean he's a lock by any stretch. He has his weaknesses.
Right.
And plenty of people who are early frontrunners don't become the nominees. So I'm not saying this is a done deal by any stretch. But if he was yesterday's news, he would not be at the top of every poll. And it's not just a name ID thing. He is out there. He has been out there for 2 years. He's the most popular surrogate on the campaign trail for 2018. His favorite numbers are good. People genuinely like Joe Biden. Not everybody. I know people that hate Joe Biden, but he's got real fans.
I want to throw out a caveat, too, which is to say, just because I think Elizabeth Warren probably missed her window and Chris Christie missed his window, doesn't mean that just capturing the zeitgeist is the only way. Like, Ted Cruz ran, and he's not president, and he didn't win the primary. Wesley Clark, he captured, he had a moment, right? And it didn't pan out. He wasn't ready for prime time.
John Edwards tried to do the moment thing, and that also failed miserably, even before the news of his affair and Love Child came out. So if you're Warren, to get back to Warren here, so yeah, I agree she missed a window before. But it is possible to move past that and get a second. I mean, John McCain missed his window, gutted it out in 2008, even though people wrote him off. You need to make adjustments.
But I think McCain actually proves my point more than he disproves my point.
Because he didn't become president?
Yeah.
I mean, let's run the nomination. Let's just stick to winning the nomination.
All right.
People thought McCain was out of it completely, and he still managed to survive and get the nomination. So I think Warren has to. She starts in a hole. She starts with more people saying she can't win than they were saying 1 year ago. And that requires her to not just do what she was planning to do, but to make the extra argument, I need to disprove your preconception that I can't win. Now, so two other points I want to make there related to that. Number one is, you noted that people are saying, are talking misogyny at the way she's been treated in her introduction. That arguably is a help for her, that there are now Democrats saying, wait a second, stop burying Elizabeth Warren. This is ridiculous. This is unfair. There's nothing wrong with her. Don't give me your nonsense Politico knee-jerk pundit narrative. She deserves a fair shot at this. So she might get a second look from people on that basis. And she got knocked down a peg because she tangled with Trump. She is not the last candidate to tangle with Trump over the next year and a half of this process. He is going to be meddling. He's going to be tweeting. He's going to be giving people nicknames. He's going to be trying to come up with arguments that divide Democrats, just as he did in 2016. And other people are going to get their chance to show they know what to do in that circumstance. And I guarantee you, most of them will not do a good job doing it because it is difficult. And so,
but you know my thing. I think the way to beat Trump is generational change, and he's going to try to mock you, and he's going to be like, okay, old man, you're okay, Archie Bunker. Obama could have outcooled Donald Trump, right?
Theoretically,
he could have.
But I think, what happens in a live fire situation?
I know, and again, I think Beto O'Rourke is positioned to be the guy who could do it, but maybe he falls apart, right? Maybe he's not ready. You never know, right?
I mean, he never really took it to Cruz. I mean, he was trying to run a very upbeat, positive campaign. He didn't have some secret sauce to, make Cruz, wither in a puddle of insults.
But I don't know if it would have worked in Texas. See, that's the problem. See, that's why Rubio theoretically could have done this to Trump, but it wouldn't have worked in a Republican primary. This is the kind of thing that it's more of a macro thing. I don't know if it's making sense what I'm saying. Like in a Republican primary, portraying your opponent as an old, out of touch white guy doesn't win you any votes if you're Marco Rubio. But in a general election,
but I don't think the Republican primary electorate was very primed to make their decision based on who's the best bet to win the general. They did not care about that. I mean, obviously Trump won, but they weren't making some sort of clever strategic decision who was the most viable general election candidate. They were just simply venting their id, and it all panned out for them. Now, there are a lot of Democrats, particularly on the left, that hate the whole electability argument. Stop trying to game out this is going to play. You vote with your principles, vote with your gut. But even that is an electability argument. They are saying, and they believe, that the way it's all about the way to win. Is it by leaning to the right, or is it by doubling down your convictions? Even people on the left have been saying Warren can't win. That is just embedded in almost every Democratic primary, even if people have different theories of the case, what it means to be electable. And so, unlike almost any other primary situation, you're going to get tested by the incumbent early. Most incumbents stay quiet in the primary process. This one doesn't. So Democratic voters are going to see, what does this matchup look like? How do I visualize the same stage together? What's their game plan going to be? And I have no idea.
I'm sorry. I will say, this is an interesting point I hadn't thought of, but one good thing, if you're a Republican, one good thing about Trump is that he won't stay quiet. Now, you could argue that in a way he's helping Democrats by weighing in now and testing them. Democrats could use that as an opportunity to pick the person who essentially could survive Trump the best. I think that would be smart of them to do. But I really believe I really believe George Bush made a huge mistake in 2003 and 2004, where he left Democrats basically alone. And their entire primary became who can one-up the other one on attacking George W. Bush. And essentially it happened in a vacuum for over the course of a year. And Howard Dean started it and saw that he could get traction doing it, and then everyone else tried to emulate it. And Bush was pretty much radio silence, never tried to defend himself. This is my recollection of it. It may be my perspective, but I think that if you're a Republican, in a way, it's smart that you have a guy who is not going to observe that kind of norm or protocol by remaining quiet during this process.
Let me say one more point about Warren, which is mainly an argument why I would not count her out, even though I agree she starts in the hole and has had a bad year. If you look at her announcement video, it's very clear she has a fully fleshed out argument for her candidacy and her view of what the next president should be doing. It's obviously economic populism. I mean, that is her wheelhouse. But she ties a lot of threads into that. She has a legitimate record of work on the subject, both in the Senate and before she was in the Senate. She can legitimately argue, I've been doing this. I just out of the spotlight, in the spotlight. I've been doing it for decades. I know what the problem is. I have a set of policies that I've worked on for years that solve the problems that we face. She comes into this with a lot more thought, a lot more preparation than not every candidate, but I think most candidates. Certainly the newer ones, like an O'Rourke or a Booker or a Gillibrand or a Harris, who are playing a lot of catch up. Bernie obviously has a very fleshed out platform. I think Biden has a very fleshed out platform. The rest of them are going to look thinner by comparison to the substance. Now, maybe that's not the entire criteria here, but I do think when they get up on a stage together, that kind of stuff does give one an edge, or potentially give one an edge if you know how to play those cards. And so as others hit their bumps in the road, and Trump's only one of them. The others are going to have issues that are surrounding race or gender or geography or ideology, whether it's on the left or it's from the center. There's pitfalls everywhere for everybody in this contest, and so that playing field may get more level as we go along, and someone who kind of has a lot of their stuff figured out in advance could be able to ride out those complications better than others. Having said that, I do think Warren is, I do think that framework she's built for herself is kind of narrow. I mean, you can put a lot of things into economic populism, but I was unimpressed by her foreign policy address, which she gave a few weeks or months ago, I forget exactly when, because she's trying to extend the economic populism argument to that. Because she's just not comfortable going outside of that framework. And I do think foreign policy matters in a presidential race. I do think there's a threshold you have to clear. There's going to be foreign policy crises. There is Syria. There is China. There is North Korea. There is Russia. These things will come up. And if it's always coming back to economics with her, I mean, Bernie had that problem against Hillary. He'd always bring it back to his economic platform, and it looked like, come on, guy, you need to have a real foreign policy vision here if you're going to be commander in chief. And that, I think, was a big problem for him. It's potentially a big problem for her, but she does start, I think, several steps ahead of others in having a theory of what her campaign is about.
My Skype tells me we have a poor network connection.
Oh, mine does
How do
not.
I sound?
You sound fine.
Do I sound okay?
You sound okay.
Right,
I'm the guy recording, so I think we're okay on my end.
We'll keep on rocking then. All right, what are we going to talk about next, my man?
Well, we talked a lot about the shutdown already. I don't know. I don't have too much new to say, except I would still argue Trump is the one with the short end here. Trump.
So, I mean, Democrats are about to take over the House. Yeah. I assume they're going to immediately pass a bill and send it to the Senate. Or do they can they pass the bill the Senate already passed and just send that to the president without going to the Senate? I don't even know the rules there.
The slate's wiped clean.
Okay.
So, I mean, if the House took what passed the Senate letter by letter, it will still have to go back to the Senate before it got sent to Trump's desk. I don't.
Right.
My understanding is they're not going to do exactly that. They're just saying somewhat. Their plan was, fund pretty much everything through, I think, the end of the fiscal year, if I remember correctly, and Homeland Security is on a shorter track because that's where the border security issue gets dealt with. But it would extend it for at least a month or so.
I don't feel like there's a lot of – I know we've had Christmas and New Year's, but it doesn't feel to me like there's a huge panic about the shutdown or like it's day 50. I'm not hearing a lot of that.
Well, I think you're starting to see a bit more of it. I just saw an article today, national parks in disarray because you can go, but there's trash everywhere. Smithsonian shut down, the Panda Cam is shut down, or it's about to be shut down. And there are workers not getting paid, with no obvious prospect when they will get paid. Now, I agree with you. It's not that sort of DEFCON 1 situation in the media, but that might build.
We've had that before.
That might build over time. But this is a partial shutdown. It's not everything. Number one, with Trump, there's always lots of other news going on that's of great import that can be distracting. So I argued before the new year, this will go on for a long time, in part because Trump doesn't care about this stuff. Trump doesn't care if there are articles about these things. He doesn't care if his poll numbers are in a weak place because of it. And he wants to fight the good fight. In fact, it doesn't have an end game. Doesn't really matter. I mean, that's why I think it will eventually
That gives some leverage too, though.
Well, I wouldn't go that far because Democrats don't care either. Democrats aren't losing at the polls, so they could ride this out for a long time and say Trump's the guy laying you off and screwing your national parks, not us. They can hold out for in perpetuity too. It's the other Republicans that may start feeling the pressure because they actually do care about their poll numbers and worry that they could lose the Senate if this goes on for an impossible period of time. So the question becomes, can McConnell and McCarthy actually mount an override vote at some point, which would be hard for them, but I don't know what other avenue out of this mess is.
I can't imagine them doing that.
And then this would go on all year, But you might just simply get a bunch of laid-off workers that have to go find other jobs, and that would be a significant drag on the economy. It's not a small number of workers. People might get angry they can't visit the national parks the way they used to, and Trump's going to say, I don't care.
See, the problem is, too, there is no bright side to this. We don't even save money, right? We probably lose money from the shutdowns.
Well, it's an economic drag. They've always been economic drags. If you have government agencies that can't, buy stuff from private companies as they normally do, that's an economic downturn.
Well, we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see if this heats up. There is a thing where one of the things about Trump is if there's how do I put this? I'll use an example like when I worked at the Daily Caller, okay? If someone working there wrote or said something controversial, outsiders might complain and be like, you need to fire this person. But they weren't going to get anywhere, right? It wasn't going to result in anybody being fired. And so people basically quit complaining about things. And I think maybe with Trump, there's a similar phenomenon, which is if Trump cared about his ratings, it would in a sense incentivize the media and others to talk about the downturn. To talk about the shutdown. And you would have Trump looking all flustered and, what are we going to do? But because he doesn't care, it's actually not as good of a news story. At some point, it becomes a boring news story. And he's going to be, as you mentioned, chumming the waters with other tweets and stories. So he gets away with things that other politicians, certainly other Republicans, wouldn't get away with.
Well, I hesitate to say he's getting away with it. He still has bad poll numbers. He didn't get away with this stuff in 2018. He had a bad midterm where 8% margin for the Democrats in the House, even though held on to the Senate. And he's still, I would say, running from behind in 2020 as things stand. He does not poll well against the main frontrunners of the Democratic Party. So I think it's one thing to say you can have a shutdown for a couple of weeks and people will eventually forget about it. If you want for several months, that might be a different, or one that literally goes on for more than a year, which I don't think those are crazy scenarios, quite frankly. Those might have more lasting impacts on a president.
Well, could it be that if the longer this goes on, the more people realize it doesn't matter? Like, we drove by the other day on the George Washington Parkway. You could see that Theodore Roosevelt Island was closed. Like, there's a to get to the island, you have to take a bridge across the Potomac River, and the doors to the bridge were closed. I guess they were locked. I'm assuming Theodore Roosevelt Island is closed. Maybe it just was that day. I assume it's the shutdown. But then, like, my wife and kids, I told them that, and they were like, "Oh man, that's a bummer." Then I'm like, "Were we going to go there today anyway?" No, like we weren't going to go there. I mean, people may realize that a lot of this stuff isn't actually vital to their lives.
Well, but I think a lot of people do go to national parks for vacations. They do visit D.C., want to go to the Smithsonian, the National Zoo. There are things. I mean, I live near a Department of Agricultural regional agency. You know, they can't do their normal work with the area farmers. I'm sure there are a lot of places around the country where that's going to be noticeable. There are a lot. I mean, it may not be so big that it commands the news every day, but I think there are a lot of little things out there that if it goes on for an extended period of time, I mean, maybe it doesn't drive you insane, but you're gonna be like, Jesus Christ, DC, get your act together. Come on, Trump, this is nuts. I think that kind of it just adds to the sense of sort of this general sense of Washington dysfunction. Democrats exploited that very expertly to win in red areas in this midterm. And if it goes as far as to actually affect the broader economy, here Trump's trying really hard to sell the economy. I mean, maybe he should have tried to sell it harder 2 months ago. But he still likes to talk about GDP, talk about job creation. Now the market's tanking. It's hard for him to brag about that. If you start seeing people who were working with the federal government saying, I need to go find a job now. I can't wait for this to end. And you have an influx of workers that weren't there before. Maybe that unemployment number starts ticking up again. Maybe that GDP number starts to fizzle. People. This is a bit of a sideways point, so forgive me. But in Obama's lame duck session in 2010, he made that deal with Republicans to extend the Bush tax cuts in exchange for extension of the long-term unemployment insurance. And he got sort of nicked on that from the left, saying, well, why don't you shut down these tax cuts? Why cave into these guys all over again? That was economic stimulus. And a lot of it geared towards, lower class and middle class. And if you did not have that stimulus, that extra nudge, it is possible that the GDP would not have been in the black come 2012. That could have tipped back into a double recession because the GDP in 2012 wasn't that great. It was just sort of barely, it was better than it was. It was better than economic free fall, but it wasn't gangbusters. And it might not have cleared 0% if you didn't have that extra push. Trump has spent this lame duck potentially making the economy worse, coming in off of a peak, and not even going to exploit the peak in the midterm. If he actually ruins it, maybe it was going to downturn anyway, just on the basis of cycles. But if he's accelerating it by this action, people might look back and say, you lost this here. Yeah. You lost this by shooting yourself in the foot.
Trump's only been president for 2 years, but for all the chaos that he's done, all the crazy stuff, all the, dysfunction and erratic stuff he's done, nothing really bad has happened. And the question is it like magic? Is it luck? Is he the luckiest person ever, or will gravity reassert itself?
Well, and how many of these actions are going to? How many ticking time bombs are there in the system? They're going to detonate.
Well, there's one in Syria. There's several in Syria. If we actually withdraw, you could have as I wrote about at the Daily Beast, you could have a genocide of Kurds at the hand of the Turks. You could have the reemergence of ISIS. Never mind the fact of what Russia and Iran may do. So, but the economy is another one. Can Trump defy gravity for 2 more years?
I mean, and look at the foreign policy front. So we talked about this a little bit last show. I had a piece about this in the Real Clear Politics this week. You know, Trump pulling out of Syria has been viewed, I think, on the left and the right, kind of in isolation. So if you're kind of hawkish, you're mad. And if you're more isolationist / pacifist, you're cool with it. You know, there's like 3 articles in The Nation magazine praising Trump for pulling out of Syria because in and of itself, you know, I don't want America to be occupied in the Middle East. Trump was pulling out of the Middle East. Thereby, this is good. And if you are Lindsey Graham, you know, Trump is abandoning the battlefield. We should be fighting ISIS, and therefore this is bad. You know, my point is, you have to look at Trump's foreign policy actions in the broader context. There's a broader foreign policy debate that's going on, and we as citizens haven't always caught up to it because we get kind of stuck in our debates of the past. But you can't separate pulling out of Syria from Trump's increasing closeness to Russia, to his free passes to Saudi Arabia, to his niceness towards Turkey, to his warm relation with North Korea. These are all part of a set of actions where, you know, you might like one piece or another piece based on your preconceived biases. But the larger import of it all is Trump saying that we need to have, you know, American first nationalism that sets aside human rights as a centerpiece of our foreign policy and gives essentially autocrats free rein to do what they want to do. I mean, that to me is the basic thrust of the overarching foreign policy. And you may say, well, Obama wasn't squeaky clean on all of these issues. You know, he didn't go on the ground on Syria in a robust way. He didn't get in Saudi Arabia's face and everything or what have you. But Obama still had a view of maintaining a liberal international order. So, for example, some people say, well, Obama, Trump, it's the same thing. You know, Obama pulled out of Iraq and Trump pulled out of Syria. Trump says we're being played for suckers. Obama said free riders aggravate me. It's the same thing. But Obama was saying that, I mean, and you can go back to the Atlantic interview where he said those things, in the context of when we have a shared agenda with our allies and they're all doing their fair share, we'll all get more of what we want. Ben Rhodes, his foreign policy, had said that Obama's favorite foreign leader was Angela Merkel, because she was a pragmatist who was committed to the liberal international order. That is not Trump's end goal, is to strengthen people like that. So there may be a certain degree of overlap, but the end games are completely different. And so if you're a conservative, you have to be worried that not just that he's pulling out of a particular battle, but he is emboldening. And so if you're a conservative, you might be happy that he pulled out of the Iran deal. I hate that Iran deal. That's some liberal peacenik nonsense. We need to be tough on these people. Well, pulling out of Syria emboldens Turkey, who is closer to Iran. And his warmth with Russia also potentially helps Iran in Syria. So you may say, well, he's nice to Saudi Arabia. They don't like Iran. I want to see him tilt the balance towards them. Oh, wait, when you let Saudi Arabia go unchecked, oh, they murder people. Oh, they have massacres in Yemen. Maybe I'm not cool with that either. So it's hard. You can't look at these things in isolation. And all these things that make you kind of queasy now, who knows what they look like 2 years from now, to get back to our original point. How messy is this world going to look when it all is said and done, we're in 2020?
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, who knows what's going to happen, but the fact that Trump is largely skated on consequences, the economy, a lot. I know that there's been stock market dips and stuff, but I mean, as of now, most people look at the unemployment rate. Now, Trump pointed out when Obama was president that the unemployment rate really doesn't matter. It's workforce and participation that should matter. And a lot of people have just checked out of the system. But by the metrics we normally use, things are still going pretty well. And same thing in terms of foreign policy. Obviously, we're involved in a lot of places, but nothing has gone catastrophically wrong in the last 2 years, despite all the chaos. And in a way, I'd rather have had something happen that shocked us as opposed to the other argument, which would be there's going to be a tipping point where all of a sudden things start to go really bad.
Well, which could happen or could not. I mean, it's hard to time these sorts of things. But to bring us back to the Democratic presidential primary for a second, to your point, as of today, the economy writ large isn't the main problem. So it's somewhat awkward for Elizabeth Warren to make this all about economic populism when that isn't the thing that is irritating not just the country, but particularly the left and the Democratic base. It is fear of what havoc he's wreaking on the entire national, international stage. Now, it could be that the economy does take a dive, and being in the economic populist wheelhouse is going to look great 6 months from now or a year from now. But because things are so volatile and uncertain, if you have a certain lane that you're good in, that may not be the lane that makes the most sense when it comes time to vote. And if you're a candidate, and I don't think Biden's the only person like this, but I think Biden is an example. Biden has a lot to say on domestic policy and international policy. He's got fleshed out views in both areas. So there's not going to be a moment where he's going to be flustered what to talk about. So other candidates might well get there. I mean, I think Obama didn't start in a place where he was fluid across the board, but eventually he did come across well in all areas. But I think that is going to be the challenge for these candidates, to be up to speed on everything, because you don't know what's going to be the hot issue when it's crunch time.
I think, and we should do the listing, but I mean, I could see Biden doing good. I could see Bernie actually doing okay, even though he's not my number one pick if I were a Dem. I could see, and maybe a Sherrod Brown. I could see Beto. I could see Oprah. I could certainly see Michelle Obama.
Well, they're not running.
When we go through the list, I just think Elizabeth Warren, I think, Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker's not at the top of my list either, but there's just certain people that I just, and they tend to be politicians, Now, what is it about Joe Biden that he's not? I mean, he's obviously a career politician, but he has this authenticity that it's hard to preserve when you are, in the U.S. Senate.
Well, it's familiarity that other people don't have, because he's been in the game for so long, and there's plenty of downsides to that. Massive voting record, lots of things to pick apart, lots of statements that he made in the past that don't look so great in contemporary light. But Trump once made a point that if you, I guess someone was saying how he was overexposed and should take a breather, and he was like, no, that's when you push on. That's when you become an icon. When you don't leave the stage. So I think Biden sort of reached that level. I mean, he's a former vice president. That's not nothing. It's very hard to beat a former VP in a primary because they have that level of comfort with the public, especially when you are VP for a popular president. I mean, and of any think of vice presidents that maintained their own personas and their own brands, who didn't become second bananas. That's hard to think about, quite frankly. Biden's a rare guy that managed to pull that off. So he's not going to be easily.
That's a big deal.
People who think that, again, I'm not saying he's a lock, but if you think he is yesterday's news, and so I don't have to worry about him if I'm a competitor, I think it's a bad strategy. You need to think about, how do I get past this guy? Because he's going to be in your way.
Look, I think Dems could do a lot worse than to nominate him. I just think he may face some interesting challenges in a primary. But that's why they play the game, right?
That's right.
Why don't we close out on this green AOC, Pelosi? Where are we on this battle?
You want to do that and not Romney?
We could go either way, man. Or we could do both.
I hesitate about AOC because there's this newly developed issue about the House rules package. Just briefly, AOC was pushing this Green New Deal committee we talked about on the past show. Pelosi basically said, screw that, we're not doing that. Gave AOC nothing. None of her demands were met. And AOC lamented it. Her allies were kind of grumpy about it. But she, in a tweet from the other day, she said she still supports the committee Pelosi is doing. There's going to be some climate committee. It's just not tethered to a Green New Deal. It doesn't ban members who take fossil fuel money. It doesn't have subpoena power. All the things she really wanted, she didn't get. So she wasn't planning to draw a red line on it and say, because this is part of the rules package, the establishment of the committee is in a rules resolution, which is the first day of business on Thursday. We're taping Wednesday afternoon here. Another rules controversy has developed in that an old PAYGO rule that you can't pass new spending without offsetting it with cutting of spending or raising taxes. There are folks on the left that don't like that because it seemingly prevents ideas that involve deficit spending, which they want. They don't want to be hemmed in by budget constraints. Now, the PAYGO rules are very porous in the past. I mean, Obama passed the $800 billion stimulus package under the PAYGO rule because they waived it. The Republicans waived PAYGO for the tax package. It gets waived all the time. So I think it's kind of silly that it's become a thing. But I can't say, sitting here Wednesday afternoon, whether or not the left is going to actively revolt and sink the rules package, which if they did, would also sink the climate committee in the process, though perhaps we could resurrect it in the modified rules package. But it's a little in flux right now, so I'm hesitant to speak on it in detail.
Okay. So I'll just ask you a broader question. Nancy Pelosi sails through?
Oh, I mean, she's speaker. That's done. And I think, if you want to make me bet, I'd say she will get past this PAYGO flap. I think she has shown she can count heads. She's shown she can keep people on board. I don't think she would have put the rule in if she didn't think she could see it through. But if, and it's an if, the left does sink the rules package, that does start her speakership on a much rockier beginning, because now the left will have shown we are not willing to go wherever you lead us. You're going to have to abide by our demands if you want to get stuff done going forward. I think up until this point, and I'm still inclined to say, I think Pelosi is the master of that domain, but that does raise a question over the next 24 hours what happens there.
And then you mentioned Romney, so he's got an op-ed in the Washington Post where he is critical of Donald Trump, and this is basically like Romney signaling what kind of senator he'll be. And I don't know. I'm sort of torn over it. Part of the problem with the Never Trumpers is that the only thing that unites us is a dislike of Donald Trump, but we don't necessarily have a leader or like each other. And there's different types of Never Trumpers. And I've never been a huge Romney fan. And I don't know. I guess my question about this op-ed is simply why do this? What good is it to do? I just don't know what good comes of it. If you're going to be that way, be that way. If you're going to stand up to Trump when you think he's wrong, then do it. why do you need to telegraph it or put out this op-ed? I just don't know what the benefit there is.
I mean, this is coming against the legacy of Jeff Flake. I mean, Romney's op-ed was very Flake-esque.
That's not a good place to be.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, it basically is saying, I don't like Trump's character, I don't like his tone, his foreign policy unnerves me, but I'm still going to vote for stuff if I like it. I'm going to treat every bill case by case. And so long as we're doing conservative things, I'm not gonna complain. If that's where this lands on, what's he doing that's all that interesting or novel? It's only interesting, it's only relevant if he's actively saying, I'm not going to be a reflexive partisan. You're going to have to earn my vote. You're going to have to make changes to your presidency if you're going to get my cooperation going forward. And perhaps I am going to actively seek out bipartisan legislation and tell Democrats I'm open for business because the track we're on now is destabilizing for our country. That would be different than Jeff Flake.
Yeah. There's something about Romney. He has the wimp factor with George H.W. Bush. There's the wimp factor with Mitt Romney. I mean, Jeff Flake had it too. I don't know what it is, if it's just stylistic or temperamental, but there's something there. And now look, Romney's a lot safer than Flake. It's a lot easier to keep your seat in Utah in 6 years than it was to keep your seat in Arizona in 2018. But if you're going to, do what you need to do, that's fine. Vote the way you need to vote. There was something about this op-ed. I mean, I should be, theoretically, Bill, right? Should I not be on board with this? But I'm not.
You're a case-by-case guy. I mean, that basic framework you're generally okay with. That you never counseled Flake to vote against things that he otherwise believed in just to stick it to Trump.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with anything that Romney actually said. But it just strikes me as like virtue signaling, and I don't know. There's something about it. Maybe I can't put my finger on what it is about it.
Well, it's an open question. If it is just virtue signaling, I mean, this is what the left hated about Flake and McCain and people like that. If you're just doing this to curry favor with the Washington punditocracy, and you never follow through, it's all a con game. And this just seems like one more.
See, the problem I have with the left is, I don't think they give credit to any conservative. Like, no matter how, like, as long as you're pro-life, you're bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless you, like, somebody, I forget who it was, somebody today, I think it was, Carney over at the Washington Examiner was like, until you don a pussy cap and like, adopt their ideas, like you're never going to be good enough for them, no matter how heroic or brave you are, of calling out your own side or standing up against your own side. And so, I mean, to me, that doesn't mean don't do it. It means just don't expect them to ever give you credit because they're not going.
Well, if you're a independent-minded conservative that is willing to compromise, don't base your actions on what does the most hardcore leftist says about you. That shouldn't be what drives your decision making. John McCain, I would argue, John McCain did break ranks sometimes, not as much as I would have liked, and I could cite examples where I thought he was straight up hypocritical and inconsistent. But there are examples where he did break ranks. He did vote against Obamacare repeal. He did work with Obama to save his NLRB appointments. He did do the Gang of 14 to save the filibuster and work a compromise on judges. He did do campaign finance reform. He did vote against Bush's tax cuts.
So why does John McCain come out looking better than Jeff Flake?
Well, Flake didn't do those things. Flake did anything where he actually followed through and broke ranks. At the very end,
just talk.
At the very,
it was just talk. He would
mostly talk. The very end, and he deserves some credit for this. He did say to Mitch McConnell, "I am not moving judges in the last 2 months, unless you put legislation on the floor to protect Robert Mueller." And McConnell didn't do it, and Flake did not vote for any judges. And it's not strictly because of Flake, because Schumer also resisted as well. But Republicans got one judge confirmed after the midterm. So there were 31 left hanging who were
So Jeff Flake's big heroic stand is stopping conservative judges from getting confirmed.
Well, I mean, again,
I'm supposed to applaud that?
Well, I mean, maybe you're not, but if you are saying that what Trump represents is this deep threat to democracy itself, and therefore I'm going to put that ahead of other concerns, at least here was the case for Flake saying, you know what, Mueller's investigation is what's primarily important, and I'm willing to sacrifice something to make sure that's protected.
Except all of those, I don't think it's going to matter at all. Those judges are all going to get confirmed by Mitch McConnell.
We'll see. I mean, they have the Senate again. You know, I said a little tweet storm about this, by the way. For all the talk about Trump's massive judicial score, so he got 2 Supreme Court justices. And
so far,
I mean, in the first 2 years.
So far.
In the first 2 years, and he got 83 lower court justices. Maybe he'll get 3 Supreme Court justices. I don't know, but Obama got 2 Supreme Court justices in his first term. I believe as did Clinton, and I think as did George Bush, and I think also H.W. Bush. So that was 1 term. I think they all got 2 each, if I remember correctly. Now, 83 lower court justices over 2 years is a little under 3.5 judges per month, to 3.46. Obama, over his 8-year period, was 3.41, and George W. Bush was 3.4, and Bill Clinton was like 3.9. So, as it stands today, there's no real change. I mean, what's different is Trump front-loaded. He got more in the first 2 years. The others got in their first 2 years. But Obama caught up later on. Now, Trump's got another 2 years here. Maybe the pace can escalate over the course of the 2 years, but Democrats have cards to play. There are procedural maneuvers they can do to slow things down. So if you're not conferring a judge today, you've lost the day. They had 30 on tap after the midterms. They thought they'd smooth sailing for the end of the year. They got gummed up. Boom, you lost those days. So you can't know that he's going to make that up. Maybe.
Right. But so Jeff, I just want to revisit this though. So Jeff Flakes finally, after talking, does something to stand up to Trump, and what we got out of that was less conservative judges. That's the big. That's what Jeff Flake's deliverable is.
If you're a transactional conservative who is saying, you know what, I don't like this about Trump or that about Trump, but you know what, on policy, we got our judges, we got our tax cuts. That's what really matters here. I just got to grit my teeth to all the other stuff. If that's your view, then what Flake does is anathema to your view. If you're saying Trump represents a threat to our democracy, and that takes precedence over everything else, and I will prove that by sacrificing other elements of my policy agenda to preserve our democratic institutions, you do what Jeff Flake did at the very end there.
Well, I don't think that's a binary choice. I mean, I don't think those are the 2 options. I think I probably fit somewhere in the middle.
What's the sweet spot? What would Matt Lewis do to check Trump?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not in the Senate, so I'm criticizing people for writing op-eds, and that's kind of my go-to move. Maybe I'm jealous. I don't know what I would do, but I think that you've presented the 2 options, which are, one is like transactional, and then the other is seeing Trump as like this, I don't know what the term would be, but just a threat so grave to democracy that you cannot, the normal rules don't apply, and you must take extreme measure to stop not even his agenda, actually, the conservative movement's agenda. That's the part that bothers me about it. Like, if this was Trump's, if you were stopping, let's say Donald Trump, now this may be part of the problem, right? He can unilaterally withdraw from Syria, and I guess Jeff Flake couldn't have done anything to stop that. The one thing he could stop is the good stuff that's happening right now.
Well, I think what you could do, if you're looking for a sweet spot, maybe it's not all that sweet. And we don't know what Romney, to get back to Romney, we don't know what his end game is. We don't know what he wants out of this. Is this a virtue signal, or is it a precursor for something more robust? You could say, on the legislative front, I'm going to actively oppose Trump in certain areas. I'm going to actively oppose Trump on trade. I'm going to actively push harsher Russia sanctions. I'm going to conduct real oversight into Trump's dealings with Russia and Saudi Arabia and North Korea. I'll vote for the tax cuts. I'll vote for the judges. But where I disagree with them, I'm going to be very aggressive. I'm not going to just tisk on Twitter. I'm going to do something about it at the Senate level. And if he's a threat to our fabric of our democracy, I'm going to actively call for a primary challenge. I'm going to say we have to, maybe we're going to lose. Maybe it's not going to be simple. But if I mean it when I say, I can't just salute come the primary. I need to do something to save my party and run myself or recruit somebody to run against it.
No, I think what you've just described is much more where I would like to. That's kind of where I would be, where I think the sweet spot is, and I guess Romney's not really there yet, but maybe he'll hear this dialogue.
What Romney's potentially interesting, and maybe he is just another flake, and this is all a waste of his time and our time. And he's never been one to have deep convictions. That's not been his thing, to be charitable. He's been very calm about his managerial abilities, but he has taught when he has occasionally talked in more principled terms. He often goes back on himself for attempted short-term political or pragmatic gain. So we don't know if that is just that he's always going to be that guy and is never going to be consistent about something, or is this a Mitt Romney in his twilight? Senator from Utah, where he's very beloved, who's got nothing to sweat. Even if he loses re-election, who cares? I'm Mitt Romney. I got a pile of money, and I've been a governor and a senator. I will go down history as being an honorable person, no matter what I do here, as long as I'm true to myself. He doesn't have to worry about short-term political calculation. He can really let loose, if he is capable of letting loose, and do what he thinks is really right. So I don't know if this is a signal that he is going to be that guy. And if he is that guy, what is that guy? What is the thing?
Well, speaking of that guy, let me just maybe subscribe to the great man theory of history for a second. But I do feel like one of the things Donald Trump got right is that our elites are not up to the challenge. And you saw how Trump rolled over Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio, and just people who just were not up to the challenge, at least not yet. And it does seem like there is, there's the line, Larry Bird's not walking through that door. Mm-hmm. Do you know about that? Ronald Reagan's not walking through that door. Well, I mean, it seems like there is we need. It doesn't have to be a dude. It could be a woman. But, every once in a while, somebody comes along who has leadership abilities and character. And it would be nice if that person were on the scene. But the people that I see, I don't think Jeff Flake. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe Jeff Flake's Winston Churchill. Maybe he's gonna, but I don't think so. I don't think that's Jeff Flake.
But Romney could, if you wanted to, and again, I'm not saying I've started that he wants to be this guy. He could. I mean, it's 53-47. So if he can put together 4 Republicans, or 3 including himself, he can cause a lot of damage. Can he work with Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski? Lamar Alexander is more of a moderate guy, not running for office again, kind of a free ranger. Are there a couple other guys who are not up for re-election or in their twilight, kind of want to get back to the old old days. If he has the stature, if he wanted to put together that kind of network and say, you know what, we're going to do bipartisan legislation here. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, come to my office. Let's talk business. We're going to get this Congress back on track. He could do that if he wanted to.
Do you think he could get, what's it in the Bible? If I could find just 10 good men, would you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? Do you think Romney could find 2 such accomplices?
I mean, Lamar Alexander, I think, has that bipartisan twitch and not running again. I think Susan Collins has to worry about her own reelection at this point more than she ever has had before. And Lisa Murkowski is someone who's always been a little increasingly independent. There's something to work with there. There may be a couple other people I'm not thinking about because they've been kind of quiet, and Romney might be the kind of guy who can pull someone aside and say, look, are you willing to stick your neck out here? I think if anyone could do it, he has the stature to do it.
He's waited his whole life for this moment. Well, I have to say, I hope our episodes in the new year improve. I don't think this is our best work, but we were rusty. We took a couple weeks off, right?
And you know, my audio being a disaster.
This is subpar.
Maybe you sound much more coherent and cogent than me today, strictly because of our equipment. And now I'm on the short end.
Well, it's going to be, it's going to be an interesting 2019, I'm sure. I mean, we're going to have a lot to work. We're going to have good material. Though.
I'm going to make one prediction, Matt. You know, my predictions never come true. This prediction.
They do. Lately they have.
The Democratic primary is going to be totally bonkers. It will, for those of us who are Democrats, it's going to be miserable, painful, uncomfortable, pulling our hair out, panicking that we're not going to come together in 2020. So there'll be a lot to talk about, but I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride at all.
Welcome to my world, Bill. I went through this in 2016, so
and worked out. I'm not saying it can't work out.
My only hope is that you guys end up with Kanye West as your. Wait, he's on our team now.
Yeah,
he's our guy. Well, we'll come up with someone that the Democrats deserve. That's right. I forgot he's back on our team as of today.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think he's left. I think you get Louis C.K. now too.
Apparently, he's now a right winger.
Right.
It's really weird. We always get them. It's how people find Jesus in jail. They tend to find the Republican Party after they hit rock bottom. So
a conservative, a liberal, got accused of sexual misconduct.
I have to think about that one. Well, the day that if Harvey Weinstein starts wearing a red hat, we'll know that you're right. It wouldn't surprise me.
So a quick plug. After the holiday, my interview with George Lakey, How We Win. I think I told you about that interview at the last show. George Lakey's How We Win, a great conversation about how progressive activism works and how it doesn't work. So great conversation with a man who's been in the activist trenches for 7 decades. So a great conversation.
Is that up on the new books?
New Books in Politics at the New Books Network, newbooksnetwork.com. Check that out.
Yes. I also have a podcast coming up, but check out my talk with Jamie Weinstein. I recommend that one. It's a good talk.
Beautiful.
He's a prominent podcaster and commentator.
At the National Review, correct?
At the National Review. Awesome, guys. Well, follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Tell your friends. Rate and review this podcast on iTunes. That helps us out. And we'll see you back here in the DMZ next week.
Till then.